Welcome everyone. This is Grief and Loss from a Diagnosis and Treatment presented by the Breast Cancer Resource Center. My name is Sandra Bravo. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas. The reason that I was asked by the Breast Cancer Resource Center to present is because I specialize in working with individuals that have been touched by cancer, in whether that is having a biopsy and waiting for the results, or receiving results that are not the results that one wanted, going through surgeries, chemotherapy, after treatment, just anywhere in that process of being touched by cancer. When I was 7 years old, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was an 8-year journey of my mother having multiple treatments, surgeries, bone marrow transplants. And this was back in the days when the chemotherapy infusion room was down in the basement and no one was allowed to be with you. So it left a lot of memories with me as a young child. And my mother was very important to me. So my family tried to do everything we could to help my mother along her journey. And she did finally end all her treatments after 8 years without having a reoccurrence. And so my mother was a psychological associate, so she was interested in psychology. And again, I looked up to my mother, so I became interested in psychology. So when I went to college, for my undergraduate degree, I studied psychology. And I was always interested in what people experienced, whether it was the individual receiving the diagnoses or the family members. I can remember very distinctly being a little kid, and this is when The Muppet Show was still on TV. And my family, my brother, my sister, my dad, and I went to visit my mom in the hospital. One of the many times, don't even remember exactly the reason, but it was one of the many times we went to visit her. And they had very strict visiting hours at this time, and children were not allowed in ICU. So my mother would come out and we would go into the family waiting room. And I remember walking in the very first time, and I just remember how sad everyone looked. And I remember when The Muppet Show came on, all of a sudden, all the families were laughing and having fun. And that left quite an impression on me. So I was always interested in figuring out how can we help people along this journey. And so in my undergraduate degree, I was led to working with individuals that had experienced some kind of trauma. I worked with young children, I worked with school-age children, and it wasn't until later in life when I went back to graduate school to become a fully licensed professional counselor. It would be after I had graduated and after I had spent some time in infusion rooms volunteering and wanting to specialize in that then I was diagnosed at age 39 with breast cancer. And I learned more than I had ever learned in graduate school about what it meant to go through this journey. And I thought what a gift it was for me to be able to use that information in my practice. And so I've been very happy to be a resource for people. As a therapist, I work very holistically, and what that means is I take a look at a person in every area of their life, and we're going to discuss a little bit of that today. So let's start with what is grief. This is a very hard word to define, and so this is kind of my definition. The first thing is that it's a process, which means that it doesn't just happen. You don't go visit a therapist and then your grief is over. Or you can buy a book, read about grief, and then take a quiz or do a few things, do A, B, and C, and then it's over. So it's an ongoing process that some say never ends, just changes. So grief occurs after loss. And my favorite definition of grief is learning a new way to love the world after something has happened that does not fit in your philosophy of life. And cancer is something that's not supposed to happen to any of us. So today I thought we would discuss how do we move toward wellness after loss, because there's no way to speed grief up and there's no way to avoid it. We can push it down, we can ignore it for a little bit, but our subconscious is always saying, hey, remember me? Like, I'm not going away, I want to talk to you. And so the best thing we can do for ourselves and for other people is we can keep that person healthy in all the areas of their life as they travel this grief journey. And so let's take a look at what does it mean to be well. According to the American Psychological Association, it incorporates the ability to function fully and actively over the physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, social, and environmental domains of health. So my question for you, and this is for you to answer on your own, is how do you think you are functioning currently in the 6 domains of your life? We're going to break each domain down, because if we're not doing well in any of the 6 domains, grief is going to feel even heavier on us. So if we can make sure that we're functioning well, we'll be able to handle the grief, so to say. So again, on your own, or if you have something to write with, I'd like you to rate your own level of happiness for each of these areas. Where 0 is you are completely unhappy. There's nothing good about this domain in your life. And 10 is everything's great, couldn't be better. So the first one is physical. If you've been going to the doctor, you're probably not going to have a very high score on this. And that's okay, because after we do this, we're going to talk about how to make improvements. So the second one is intellectual. Think about how are you functioning there? And this doesn't necessarily mean school. This means challenging your brain. So this could be anything from doing Sudoku, from needlepoint, playing chess, reading books, watching documentaries, learning how to use apps that young people are using. And then emotional. This is the part, of course, me as a therapist, I'm very interested in. And if you're waiting for a diagnosis, or you've been diagnosed, or you're waiting for treatment, or you're waiting for surgery, your emotional wellness might not be very high. And that's okay for right now. Think about your spiritual life, whatever that means to you. It looks different for everyone, and it's okay whatever it is for you. Socially, how do you think your life is right now on a scale of 0 to 10? Family, friends, support groups. And then finally, your environment. This could be everything from the place you live, as in the apartment, the house, the city, to the country, to the world. And right now, there's some very tough things about our environment. There's political issues, there's COVID. And so now let's look at each one of these things. And let's explore how to increase some of your ratings so that as you go through this grief, that you're able to find a way to make sense of it. So research, at least positive psychology research, has looked at what are the buffers against mental health issues. And there have been several found. Courage, of course, how do you define that? Future-mindedness, and what does that mean? We don't want to look too far into the future because that might cause us anxiety. Optimism, interpersonal skills, faith, work ethic. But if you're not able to work, that might be something, that one's not helping me right now. Hope, what does that mean? Honesty, acceptance, perseverance, and the capacity for flow and insight. And that's the ability. Flow is losing yourself in an activity, whatever that activity may be for you that is enjoyable, such as sewing or painting or taking a listening walk, photography, playing a guitar. So let's take a look at how is your physical body. And some of these are going to be challenging because if you are going through treatment, some of your treatments to help give you longevity are going to cause you some side effects right now that you might not have complete control over. So how many hours do you sleep daily? This is very important. We have actually seen in research that people who do not get enough sleep actually will show up having ADHD symptoms after as short as 5 days in a row of having anywhere from 5 to 6 hours of sleep. Some people think 5 to 6 hours a day is wonderful. So of course, I would recommend having around approximately 8 hours of sleep, and it'll vary for each person. And so you want to try to do what you can to try to optimize your sleep. Food is something important. And again, if you're going through treatment, this can be difficult. And so there are things that you can do if you're feeling nauseous or you don't have an appetite. Many people talk about how drinking your food can be helpful. With a straw, it bypasses your taste buds, and that can be a way to get nutrients. Or maybe you're stress eating. And maybe stress eating is okay from time to time. Maybe that coping skill is what you need, and that's okay too. But we just want to check in and see if there are places where we can make improvements. Fluid is very important, and sometimes, again, during treatment, we may not get enough fluid no matter how much we drink, and we may need to go in to get some IV fluids. So knowing that if you're not feeling like you're getting enough fluids, you might need some assistance. How often do you strengthen your body through physical activity? Again, you may feel like you don't have a lot of energy if you're going through treatment, so finding what you can do. There are many organizations that offer accommodations to certain types of physical activity for people that are recovering from cancer treatment or through surgeries. So let's talk about the intellectual part of our lives. Do you feel like you're learning new things? Do you feel challenged in your professional life if you're continuing to work? It's okay to take a break from your cancer. It's not going to go away, unfortunately. It's always going to be there. And so you can take a break from it. And you can do that through learning something new. And you can do that learning something you've always wanted to learn. Some people find it an opportunity to have time to learn something new, and that could be an approach that you take. If you are still continuing to work, but you're finding it more difficult to work, what you may find useful is making accommodations in your professional life, maybe taking a new approach to your work, or maybe combining these two things, and maybe you decide to change your career. Maybe create some crafts that you want to sell online. Maybe that's something new that you want to try, and this could be an opportunity for you to do that. So this is complicated, our emotional life, and this is where a therapist can be very helpful to help you sort out what's going on. As I mentioned before, I'm a holistic therapist, so the first thing I want to check in on with my clients is what's happening biologically. So the first domain we looked at, oftentimes I may have someone come in saying, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling fatigued. And my first question for someone who has been through breast cancer chemotherapy treatment is, I ask them, are you anemic? Because maybe your problem is anemia. I've had many people that find out I am anemic and they take iron and they feel much better. Now, I'm not a medical doctor, so I will always refer you to your doctor, but I want to check in and I want to rule out biology, that it's not a biological reason that you're having certain feelings or sensations. And we want to separate those. And so we kind of will check out, okay, well, if we've already ruled out biology, then let's check in on the psychology. Something else also to be aware of is that we have found that there is an increasing diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder with people who have been through cancer treatments and diagnoses and surgeries. And the easiest way to explain that is that PTSD is a hypervigilant amygdala. That's the part of our brain where our fight or flight response resides. And so what happens is that by going through surgery and chemotherapy, your body is being attacked. Now, our prefrontal cortex, which is our executive functioning system, says, hey, this is all really good for me. This is increasing my chance of survival. But amygdala is thinking, what are you doing to me? Why are you hurting our body? And so it takes the prefrontal cortex, a lot of conversations with amygdala to help amygdala stay calm. This is why, if you've already been through treatment, you may experience the follow-up visits as anxiety producing. The day before you go, you may feel anxious and think, why am I anxious? I saw a gentleman speak at a conference once. He was a psychiatrist who had been diagnosed with testicular cancer and had gone through treatment and had passed his 5-year mark. And he still had to go yearly to check in with his oncologist. And he said every year he had an existential crisis before that appointment. And it's a part of having cancer that not everyone experiences. And so that's amygdala saying, don't go back to that office. But prefrontal cortex is like, but it's good to go there. And so in therapy, we can help someone figure out what exactly is happening with them. And one of the things we know about people that get that diagnosis of PTSD is that if you've had prior traumas, this could be the one that finally makes your amygdala say, okay, that's it. We've had enough of life. We need life to slow down. What can we do? And so that's definitely a time to check in with a professional to help you. And the good news is that there is a lot we can do for people with PTSD. We can retrain the brain and the body to experience more safety in this world. I was trained out at Fort Hood with soldiers coming back from war, and we have a lot of really good treatments for that. I use a lot of the same things that I learned with the soldiers at Fort Hood that I do with my current clients that are experiencing the cancer journey. So for some people, spirituality is not something they explore, and that's okay. I would just like to distinguish there is a difference between spirituality and religion. Spirituality is just about your understanding of why you're alive, why things are happening to you. When people get a diagnosis of cancer, they definitely ask themselves that question of, why me? And that's what we would call an existential crisis. And that's something really important to explore, because not having that answer, even if the answer you come up with is, I don't have an answer, until you find an answer that you're able to hold on to, you're going to keep coming back to that question. And social, very important. We are social creatures, human beings. And so it's important for us to bring people into this part of our life, even though it may be scary. Many people don't want to upset or worry their friends or family. And finding that balance is something that you'll learn to do on your own. And if you are feeling that way, that's a good time to reach out to support circles. There's things you can say to someone that has been diagnosed with cancer that you can't say to other people. Also, about this one is challenging, about getting out and doing social events. So what that would look like during the time of the stay-at-home order is getting to do things online. So let's talk about your environment. It's very important that your environment is a calm place where you feel comfortable to just sit and be in and relax in. I don't know how many of you feel like, this is the way I feel about baking. I can't start baking until my kitchen's clean. And so I have to get everything in order and clean before I start baking. And that's okay. So the other thing that I like to do is having motivational quotes or affirmations or pictures of positive role models or people that can help me get through difficult times. So you might have a different way to decorate your environment during this time. So just a reminder that grief is an ongoing process of learning a new way to love after loss. And grieving takes time. As much as we would all like to speed it along, as much as we would all like to not have to experience it, it's something that we go through. My favorite metaphor for grief is that grief is like ocean waves. Sometimes they come in and they just hit you and they overwhelm you. And you think, where did that come from? And you remind yourself that this will go, that this will pass. And as a therapist, that is the major indicator for me that someone is grieving as opposed to being depressed, because grief is something different than depression. You can be experiencing both of them at the same time, but there is a difference. And grief is something that comes and goes. It's not constant. And it's something that can surprise you. You can be having a great day, and then out of nowhere, you see something or hear something that reminds you of your situation, and it's just an overwhelming sadness or reminder. And you have a few moments of feeling that, and you remind yourself that it will pass, and it moves out. And then you think, what was that? When you have those experiences, I would invite you to remind yourself that that's grief. That's right. And it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It doesn't mean that it will happen again in the same way. It just means that you've experienced a great loss in your life. And part of processing that loss is to grieve it and to find a new way to exist in the world with a new body and with new ways of moving throughout your day. You are more than welcome to contact me if you have any questions you might not want to ask here. You can go to my website, my email address is there, or you can leave me a voicemail. I'm always happy to answer questions.